Hello and welcome to the Tech Bytes audiocast. My name's Tim and I'm from the Oak Bytes blogazine, and with me is Dr. Roy Shestowitz from the Tech Rights website.
It's Friday night and I'm gonna get sauce. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. He tried to boss me and was outbossed. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. Underneath his creeper bridge, hoping goats will cross. Quoting Ashcroft and Tom Ridge, I fought the troll.
Welcome to episode 17 of the Tech Bytes audiocast with myself, Tim, Roy from techrights.org and Gordon from thistleweb.co.uk. Thank you for downloading, and today's show we're going to be looking at a couple of news articles from today and yesterday, a couple of reviews and features of some Linux software which I hope you'll enjoy, and then we're going to have a discussion on Microsoft openness and an article that's recently been written about an interview with Microsoft and its views on open source and the open source community. So we'll crack straight onto the show, and I believe I'm going to pass you over to Gordon, who's going to start us off with his first article of choice.
Hi, yeah. Well, the first one that was kind of interesting here was an indie game developer. There's a story on Slashdot from an indie game developer about avoiding the powers of the DMCA, trying to do the right thing, but it's just not working. Unless you're a big company, it doesn't work. So what his story was is he had an Android game called Super Pac, and Namco Bandai have their trademarks and all that around the game of Pac-Man, and they have looked at the title and said, "Oh, that's ours, no chance, take it down." And he's basically had no choice. They've sent the DMCA notices to his ISP and to various people, and they've even, the way it's now worked out, apparently, is Google have even disabled his access to the application, so he can't even make whatever modifications that have been required. Bandai are not listing what the specific issue is, and he can't even fix it, even if they did. So this is where the DMCA just gets insane.
Is it actually a copyright issue or is it a trademark issue?
Well, that's what he seems to be trying to figure out, is it might be the trademark on the name Pac-Man, but
I think there was a story in Slashdot around 2007, maybe 2006. A person created a game of Risk based on Google Earth or Google Maps. He could try and overlay elements of the game on top of the map and try to give a feeling of the person actually playing on Earth with the maps you can zoom in and out. And it wasn't Google that had an issue with that. Google actually welcomes the use of the API and access to the maps, but it was the company which owns the rights. I'm not even sure what type of rights these are, but to the game. And then people say, well, to avoid this company's bullying, you could change the players to like horses, or some try to change the plot or the story of the game or the way the game is played.
Yeah, and so the end of the Slashdot article essentially is him as a part-time developer with limited means, i.e. can't afford expensive lawyers, but willing to make best efforts to avoid legal issues. How does one negotiate what seems to be a difficult minefield of trademarks, copyrights, and DMCA?
I can think, I saw one article today. I hadn't actually seen the Slashdot article, and that's a different story about why I haven't been liking Slashdot recently. I don't agree with some of the things they post, but what I did see is that a person called Job Jackson, who's on Identica, he posted a link to the background story of Pac-Man and who owns which algorithm, notions, and ideas, and trying to explore, who owns this thing, because it's kind of a basic thing which could be inspired by something else, or at least be represented using specific graphics. And it's always a dodgy issue, because as soon as you start to saying, well, a game that's played by X number of players, and you have not ghosts, but you have all kinds of elements going around in a maze, I mean, how abstract do you go? And then you can find lots of games infringing on each other. And I think Konami had a patent, which I know the FFII was trying to tell people about passing the ball in football or passing the ball to the nearest player, which is like the digital way of just doing what you do on the pitch. And they actually get patents on these things, and then they can charge you money if you make a football game or you pass the ball and it finds the nearest player. You know, it's kind of crazy.
Sort of staying on the same subject, I remember, I believe I remember, a good few years ago, probably about 15 or so years ago, there was a similar issue on the Amiga with a game called The Great Giana Sisters, which I believe Nintendo claimed was a rip-off of their Mario game, and I think it was completely taken off the shelves and only survived through sort of the underground scene of wares and copying between friends. So I've seen it before. To be fair, I don't know I haven't read this particular article that Gordon brought up. But it seems very similar, and I'm sure the game was Great Giana Sisters, and I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong there. But that was what I read.
Games are inspired by something else. It's the same argument which goes for copyright or for patents. You know, people who create a piece of music, they usually tend to listen to lots of songs and beats, and they even will attribute the person who was the influence to them. The person whom they listen to, usually just the records they have, will give them a certain feel and a certain flavor and a certain type of music they like. And this is what they'll play on the drums and the guitar. But nobody's going to come to them and say, well, you cannot be inspired by this element and this element, which basically makes up all the music. Now, when you look at games or when you look at even things like algorithms, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, what you've been educated to do is all becoming a synthesis of things that make up your invention or the new thing. And even things like Mario, I'm pretty sure it's based, lots of things there. You can say, oh, look, that's, the sprites in the background, that's like lots of different previous games. Did you pay for like patents or copyrights for it? And they'll probably say no, because because we're a big company, Nintendo, and you're a small company, so it's not fine for you, it's okay for us. And it's usually the same stories with patents and copyrights, derivative works, and people trying to obscure the source of the work and trying to use some fair use, but the big companies don't like using their samples or a sample of their work as something to be used in a rap song. So,
right. Well, Roy, have you got an article from today or yesterday that you want to bring up? Maybe something about we could look at WikiLeaks now or copyright still?
I'm not sure we necessarily want to go too deep into WikiLeaks, because I think it tends to become very political unless you're looking specifically at things to do with software. And there are quite a few things, and now with the latest leaks you have things about Microsoft sharing code with the same company or the same entity in China which trains people to be hackers. So people start to show the government's concern about Microsoft sharing the code with specific companies, not governments, okay, not authorities, but actually with private companies, and giving access to people to a proprietary piece of software for all sorts of reasons, commercial reasons. And this perhaps might be causing lots of zero-day vulnerabilities in the software that they have. These people get access to the code, and once they see the code or have access to the code, they have copies of that. And it's kind of like Windows is open source. It's not really open source to you, but the people who are working on hacks, they can see the source code, and they don't have to report to Microsoft what they do with it. So that's coming out of WikiLeaks. And I think I mentioned it a couple of days ago. You see employees of Microsoft in Egypt actually being involved in conversations about national security and policies and things like that. So when you have a person like Scott Charney talking about an ISP tax for people to basically try to cure so-called sick computers on the network, zombie PCs, which run Windows, he, as a person who used to work for the U.S. Department of Justice, and being a politician now, he lobbies to convince the government to change the security policies and the way they actually deal with electronic aggression. And now you have the WikiLeaks documents to show you that Microsoft is part of these discussions, which are completely diplomatic, having things to do with like the Iraq wars and people at a national